Okay, sort of as a precursor to this lesson, I have to teach just a very basic of note names, particularly the concept called enharmonic, and the keyboard is the best place to learn this from. So here we have from C to C. And if we're traveling in upwards direction, you'd have C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, and then C again. If we're traveling in a downwards direction, we have C, B, B flat, A flat, G, G flat, F, E, E flat, D, D flat, and C again. So interestingly, you'll start to already probably realize that some of these notes have two names. So this one here can be either C sharp or D flat, depending on how you look at it. This one here, D sharp or E flat. Technically, so these basically are called enharmonics. You can have here F sharp or G flat, G sharp or A flat, A sharp or B flat. Those are enharmonics. Then you have what's called a natural enharmonic, where technically speaking, E can be F flat and F can be E sharp. You don't often see it that way. And the same here, B can be C flat and C can be B sharp. You don't often see it that way, but every so often you run into a natural enharmonic in that sense. But basically, C, C sharp or D flat, D, D sharp or E flat, E, F, F sharp or G flat, G, G sharp or A flat, A sharp or B flat, B, and C. I'll explain in one moment just how that pieces together into what we're about to learn on guitar. Okay, so now that we've had a crash course in finding the notes on a keyboard and being aware of what enharmonics are, we can start this lesson in what's called guide tones with leading bass line, or bass line leading. I've heard it both ways. This was taught to me by Peter Rogine when I was studying in grad school at Five Towns College. Wonderful teacher, and this is a great lesson on how to, or great method rather, I don't know if I'd call my own lesson great, on how to basically be able to play along to any jazz standard, really. If you were to take out a songbook, you could pretty much play along to anything. And it really is pretty simple. It involves two sets of four chord shapes at the minimum. We have to learn, in order to be able to do this, we have to learn every note name on the low E string and on the A string below it. So you'll notice on the low E string, for example, open is E. That's why we call it the E string. The first fret is F. It's not E sharp, because if you remember on the keyboard, there's no black key in between E and F. So E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. I'm just going up each fret, not skipping any frets. So this is chromatically we're going. So E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, and there's no B sharp. Again, on the keyboard, there's no black key between the B and the C. So we go right from B to C. C sharp, D, D sharp, and E. So we have 12 frets that we've covered. E to high E, to E an octave above that. And that covers all those notes on the E string. If we were to go in reverse, E, E flat, D, D flat, C, and again, we're not going to go to C flat because really C flat on the keyboard is B, B flat, A flat, G, G flat, F, E. So really the best way to learn this stuff is just repeat it over and over again. Play it, visualize what you're playing, look at it to know what fret, and as you're playing it, always just say out loud the names, the note names, until it's ingrained in your head. When you start to, initially that's going to seem like a lost cause, but if you do that over and over again, and when you start to actually play it in progressions, it'll make more sense to you, and you'll be able to actually start to remember them because you've used them in context. The A string, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, and then back to A. A flat, and then G, G flat, F, and then to E. And from E, E flat, D, D flat, C, C goes to B, and then B flat, A. So you can go through those over and over again until you really have them down, and that's the foundation you need. The reason for that is we're going to learn the inside shapes and the outside shapes, and the lowest note that you're playing is going to be the note name of the chord. And the shape that you're playing will determine whether it is a major seventh, a dominant seventh, a minor seventh, or a diminished chord. Let's go through those shapes. If any of this sounds crazy, you'll start to understand it more as you go along in practice. The outside shapes involve 4 strings, but you're always muting the A string on this one. And it's going to happen very naturally, because what we'll do is we'll do these shapes on both strings. We'll use the 3rd fret as our bass, just for physical simplicity, because it'll be there. So if I have my index finger on the 3rd fret of the E string, the lowest string, the thickest string, the underside of it can naturally mute the A string underneath it. It's going to be easy. You won't even have to think about it. So these chord shapes, the fingering that I'm suggesting, please follow it. It makes your life easier. It doesn't necessarily seem to make sense within the chord shapes individually, but if you put them in context of how they tend to move around, it'll make your life a lot easier. So please, please listen to me. Index finger on the 3rd fret of the low E string, skipping the A string below it. Ring finger on the 4th fret of the D string, and right below that, your little finger on the 4th fret of the G string. So individually, E string, A string being muted, D string, and G string. Index finger 3rd fret, mute, ring finger 4th fret, little finger 4th fret. That is your dominant 7th shape. And what I'm doing, I like to hold a pick like this. You don't have to. You can hold it the more traditional pointy way, but I just like it like this. I use a thin pick for this type of strumming. The old jazz cats used to often use the ripped off cover of a match book. And I just use the wrist like this. And you want to use an outward motion because it helps you to get just those strings and not all the ones below them that you're trying to skip. On this side, when I hit the string, my fingers are only touching the frets. They're not actually pressing down until I make contact with the pick. And then I squeeze. So squeeze, 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 squeeze is how you get that chomp chomp sound between this motion and the squeezing. So this is your major 7th shape. Then, if I lift my ring finger off of the D string, which is on the 4th fret of the D string, and right next to that on the 3rd fret of the D string, I put my middle finger, we've switched from the major 7th shape to the dominant 7th shape. And again, because we're on the 3rd fret of the low E string, all of these shapes that we're doing are G. So we've done so far G major 7th, G dominant 7th. Now we need a big change to get to the minor 7th. I'm going to put my middle finger where my index finger was, 3rd fret of the low E string. This one forms a bar and a line. You're going to skip the A string, like I said. Underneath the A string on the D string, you're going to put your ring finger on the 3rd fret. And underneath that on the G string, you're going to put your little finger on the 3rd fret. So 3rd fret, skip, 3rd fret, 3rd fret. And you've got E string, mute, D string, G string. That is your minor 7th. To make that a diminished, you're going to put your ring finger where your middle finger is, up on the 3rd fret of the E string. Pardon me. Your middle finger on the D string is going to be on the 2nd fret. So Oh, I missed the one that I'm muting. So low E string, 3rd fret, muting the A string below that on the D string, the 2nd fret, and below that on the G string, the 3rd fret. So there's your diminished sound. So those are the 4 main outside shapes. Now we're going to go to the inside shapes. Now the outside shapes are open. They have a gap, one of the strings that we're skipping. The inside shape is closed. You're only using the A string, the D string, and the G string. So again, we'll use the 3rd fret. So that's a C. So all these chords are going to be C. Let's see what. So to find the C major 7th shape, middle finger on the 3rd fret of the A string. There's your C. Below that on the D string, your index finger on the 2nd fret. Below that on the G string, your little finger, not your ring finger, your little finger on the 4th fret. So there's your major 7th shape. To make that a dominant 7th, you're going to put your ring finger where your middle finger was, on the 3rd fret of the A string. Your middle finger is going to go on the 2nd fret of the D string, below that. And immediately below that on the G string, your little finger on the 3rd fret. So 3rd fret, 2nd fret, 3rd fret. And even though it seems odd, ring finger, middle finger, little finger. Dominant. To make that minor, it's real simple. Lift your middle finger on that D string off of the 2nd fret. Put your index finger on the 1st fret of the D string. And there you have your minor 7th shape. If we want to make it diminished from there, again, very simple. You're going to lift your little finger, which is on the 3rd fret of the G string. You're going to put your middle finger down on the 2nd fret of the G string. So ring finger, index finger, middle finger, 3rd fret of the A string, 1st fret of the D string below that, and 2nd fret of the G string below that. There's your diminished chord. Incidentally, if you run into an augmented chord, just flip those 2 fingers. So your middle finger is going to go north 1, and your ring finger is going to go south 1. Middle finger north 1, index finger south 1. So now you have ring finger on 3rd fret of the A string, middle finger on 2nd fret of the D string immediately below that, and immediately below that, index finger on the 1st fret of the G string. There's your augmented shape. So that gives you the main shapes on whether you're playing inside or outside. The outside being on the low E string, the inside being on the A string. When I first learned this from Peter Rogine, I nodded and tried to look intelligent, and then I went back to my room and said, what the heck was that, and how could I make sense of it? So I took a basic chord progression of C major 7th, A minor 7th, D minor 7th, and G dominant 7th, or G7. If you run into dominant 7, it's just the 7. So you might see just G7, that's your dominant 7. And we can go over that too, of how to read the chord symbols and know what the heck they're saying. But I took that basic chord progression, C major 7th, A minor 7th, D minor 7th, G dominant 7th, or G7th, and tried to see how many places I could play that progression. So like I could play an inside C major 7th on the 3rd fret of the A string, or I could play an outside C major 7th on the 8th fret of the low E string. All it does is flip the top 2 notes, the order of the top 2 notes, but the bottom note is always the same. It's the root at the bottom. So you can play that there or there. The A, I could play here or here. The D, I can play here or here, the minor 7th. And the G7th, I can play here, or I can play here. So I went through that same four-note progression using different permutations. Oops. Each time, by the way, I just change one note, one position. So that's the same four chords over and over again, but each time I'm doing it, changing something as to whether I play it in inside or outside. And so that makes it sound like I'm doing all this wild stuff when I'm just playing four chords over and over again. So that to me helped me to gain some fluency in how to use these. Beyond that is simply taking a lead sheet and trying to come up with, okay, where are these notes? And eventually you find your way in how to plug these shapes in once you know what the low string is, the note name. So what note am I on? And what's the shape that fits? Do I want to be on the low E string for outside shapes, the open shapes, or do I want to be on the A string for inside shapes or closed shapes? And that is pretty much all I can come up with right now or think of on this. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to go over this further and more in depth, but that at least gives you an introduction to guide tones with bassline leading or leading bassline. Hope that helps. Final thoughts, and this is a copy of a copy of a copy of what I've made, but for those of you that don't know me who I can't hand a copy of a copy to, I figure you can maybe do a screenshot to get this. So here is what I had written down in using chord diagrams for this. And this should give you all you need on the shapes to see them, and the fingering's right in here. And here's what I was talking about at the end of, let's see if I can get this clearly for you. At the end of where I went through it and said, okay, how can I make sense of this to apply it? And so I came up with these variations of how to play it. So this was what I played at the end, going through that basic chord pattern. So I hope that helps as well.